They fined me $85 for fishing in the lake I technically owned, so I gave it away to the county. Now the HOA pays thousands in public use fees just to set up their folding chairs, and I never touched a lawyer, ever been fined for something absurd. By your HOA, only to realize you had more power than you thought? Let me know what happened and where you're watching from. I read every story, and if you love real-world takedowns like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more quiet revenge stories. My name is Carl Vickers. I'm 62, retired civil engineer, moved to Crescent Ridge 3 years ago with one goal: peace, just a modest home, a short driveway, a view of the lake. That lake is why I bought the place. I grew up fishing with my father, old cane rods, early. Mornings, hands cold from the mist. Crescent Lake reminded me of that. Quiet, breezy, full of bass. And best of all, the original land plat showed that a section of the shoreline and part of the water itself still belonged to the house I bought. Private deeded access, clearly marked, surveyed, recorded. I thought that meant something, but the HOA thought otherwise. It started subtly, a couple of sideways glances when I fished off my little dock, an anonymous note in my mailbox. Please refrain from unsanctioned lake use. Residents must respect HOA recreation policy. I ignored it. It wasn't policy. It was control. Then a week later, I received a letter, official HOA header, $85 citation for unauthorized use of common water features. I laughed. Then I walked inside, poured a glass of iced tea, and pulled out my property deed. Parcel B1209A, Lot 47, shoreline ownership extending 42 feet past the seawall, into the lake. Confirmed in 1988, amended in 2001. I didn't just have access. I had title. The next day, I took the deed to the HOA office. Young woman behind the desk. Friendly but rehearsed. I'd like this citation removed, I said, sliding the paperwork across. She squinted at the fine, then at the map. Oh, you'll have to speak with Richard. Of course. Richard, HOA president, ex-commercial realtor. The type who wore polos tucked into jeans and shook hands with both hands like he was running for office. He came out of his glass-walled office like a game show host. What can I do for you, Carl? I explained the error. Showed the plat. Cited the deed. He didn't even look. HOA policy overrides legacy entitlements, he said flatly. That's not how property law works. It is here. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't about fishing. It was about control. I didn't argue, didn't threaten. I just nodded, took back my papers, and said, "Thank you for clarifying." That night, I called my old college friend, Dana Callister, county clerk. Brilliant, patient, and a fan of bourbon and bureaucratic poetry. I asked her one question. If I were to relinquish a parcel of waterline property, say, deed it to the county as public recreational access, what happens to private? Enforcement? She paused. Then she laughed. They'd lose all authority over it. County manages all permits, fees, maintenance. And could the HOA still use it? If they filed the right forms and paid for access? Sure. But not freely? Not unless you gifted them use rights? You thinking of being generous? I smiled. Not even a little. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepped everything. Survey confirmations, county transfer paperwork, title notarization. I paid the $38 processing fee in person. Dana stamped the final page and said, "Want to name it? Name it?" She nodded. Donors can name small parcels if they meet certain criteria. I thought for a moment, then wrote, Vickers Quiet Waters, Public Access Strip, 1442A. And just like that, Crescent Ridge HOA no longer had any say in what happened along 42 feet of their beloved lakefront. I didn't say a word. I just waited. 2 Saturdays later, the HOA threw their annual summer splash. Tents, speakers, kayaks, folding tables stacked with snacks, and every one of those items set up squarely on my former shoreline. The county ranger arrived at 11:43 a.m., walked straight to the water's edge. Clipboard in hand, asked Richard loudly for the event permit. Richard blinked. What? This area is now county regulated. Public shoreline. Event activity requires a permit. Did you apply through the regional office? Richard stammered. Looked at his board members. Turned beet red. No. This is HOA land. We've always held events here. The ranger flipped a page. Not since last month. This parcel is now designated Public Access Strip 11442A, donated by Carl Vickers. You'll need to relocate your setup or pay the temporary usage fee. How much? Base rate, $2,800. The silence was beautiful. Residents looked around. Chairs began folding. Coolers wheeled back toward the clubhouse. Richard tried to speak, failed. Then spotted me standing nearby, hands in my pockets, watching the lake. You did this? No, I said. You did. I just made it official. That night I sat on the swing out back. My dock looked the same. My fish were still biting, but something was different. Peace had returned. Not because I won, but because I never fought. I simply made the rules visible and let them follow their own logic into a corner. They built. I didn't just defend my rights. I redefined their reach, and they never saw it coming. The Monday after the summer splash disaster, Richard sent out a community-wide email with the subject line, Clarification on Recent Lake Use Changes. It was a 6-paragraph backpedal wrapped in buzzwords. He called it a temporary jurisdictional reevaluation and blamed external clerical realignment for the $2,800 fine. He never once mentioned my name, but every resident who paid HOA dues knew exactly who flipped the script. Sarah from Lot 22 was the first to speak up in the neighborhood forum. So we just lost lake access overnight because someone donated it? Why did we even have that control if it could disappear like that? And then Frank, always blunt, sounds like the HOA never had control. We were just being told we did. That comment got 49 likes in 3 hours. By sunset, 3 more residents dug up their own deeds and started asking questions. See, Crescent Ridge wasn't built all at once. It was developed in pieces, older homes grandfathered into odd contracts, newer ones tied into the HOA machine. Some had easements, some didn't. For the first time in years, people started reading the fine print instead of blindly following it. And the more they read, the more cracks appeared. That week, Richard called an emergency board session to rewrite usage policies. But here's the thing. You can't rewrite what you never legally owned. Mark, a former zoning attorney turned home brewer, attended the meeting with a hard copy of the county transfer. He didn't say a word during the first 20 minutes of Richard's presentation. Just waited. Then he walked up, placed the document on the podium, and asked, "Did anyone on this board consult a lawyer before telling residents they owned the lake?" Silence. Then Denise, treasurer, decorator, and world-class whisperer, mumbled, "It was assumed as part of the community layout." Mark replied, "Assumptions don't override land records." Residents started showing up to these meetings in folding chairs and lawn loungers, not out of civic duty, but curiosity. It was better than cable, and week by week, the HOA board shrank behind their table. Their policies turned into punchlines. But Richard wasn't done swinging. 3 weeks later, I received a second citation in the mail. This one read, "Improper. Signage on shared property, $125 fine." It was referring to a wooden sign I posted at the edge of the dock. It said, "Welcome to Vickers Quiet Waters. Enjoy responsibly. County maintained." The sign was clean, simple, county approved. But, to Richard, it was a challenge. I didn't pay the fine. Instead, I scanned the letter, added a copy of the deed transfer, and emailed it directly to the County Land Oversight Committee. Dana, the clerk who helped me with the donation, forwarded it to the County Legal Office. 2 days later, a formal letter arrived addressed to the HOA. Any enforcement attempts regarding parcel 1.42A will be considered obstruction of public access and may result in legal action. The signature, Assistant County Prosecutor. Residents started noticing how quiet the HOA got after that. No more flyers, no more notes about mailbox paint. And suddenly, mysteriously, the HOA newsletter stopped printing altogether. I kept fishing. Same dock. Same rod. Same piece. Only now, others joined me. A couple from the north side brought kayaks. A young family set up a folding chair by the shoreline, and every person who stepped onto that strip of land looked back at me with the same unspoken question: can we really be here? I always nodded, yes, you belong here. You just forgot how to ask. That month, Sarah uncovered something else. She found that the HOA had been using inflated quotes for common area landscaping. They claimed to be paying $3,500 a month. But when she called the vendor listed on the invoices, he said, "I stopped working with them last year, haven't touched that property in months." Turns out, the invoices were doctored, payments rerouted, and the checks signed by, you guessed it, Richard. Word spread fast. A resident named Thomas, retired accountant, started digging. He pulled up expense records, past newsletters, payment schedules. The more he found, the clearer it got. The HOA wasn't just overstepping, they were siphoning. At the next meeting, the clubhouse was standing room only. No projector, no budget graphs, just a whiteboard. And in big red letters, $18,250 in unaccounted funds since last September, Richard tried to explain. He used phrases like vendor backlog and accounting lag. But then Pete, Vietnam vet and respected voice in the neighborhood, stood and said, "You fined a man for fishing in his own lake, and now we find out you've been fishing through our pockets?" The room exploded. A recall vote was triggered. By Friday, legal counsel was called in, this time by the residents. And when the auditor showed up on Monday, Richard resigned for personal reasons. No farewell email, no statement, just silence, and silence finally was enough. The new board included Mark, Sarah, and a teacher named Ellie, who said she joined because, quote, "I want to help run things without ruining anyone's week." They drafted transparency protocols, posted financials monthly, and banned private enforcement outside of police jurisdiction. Most importantly, they placed a permanent marker at the shoreline. This parcel was donated for the public by Carl Vickers, proof that ownership begins with stewardship, not control. One morning, a kid fishing on the dock asked if I was the guy from the lake sign. I said, yeah. He asked if I caught anything. I held up the rod. "Just peace," he grinned. "That's cool. Most grown-ups just argue about grass. The HOA still exists, but now it works like it should. No fines without due process. No patrols in sunglasses, no pretending to be the law. And me? I still wake up early, make tea, walk down to the dock, same rhythm, same stillness. Only now I share it. And the lake, once a battleground, became a place of reunion, not just of neighbors, but of sense. Because you don't need power to change things. You just need to own the one thing no board can take away, your right to push back quietly, legally, and with purpose. 2 weeks after Richard resigned, the county returned, but not with fines or notices. They came with surveyors, zoning officials, and a project manager named Laura Dempsey. She wore hiking boots and a county-issued windbreaker, and within an hour of arrival, she had a half-circle of HOA board members following her around the lake's edge like interns at a crime scene. The county had plans. Big ones. Turns out my shoreline donation triggered a zoning review. When a private parcel becomes public, nearby, land gets reevaluated, especially if it borders infrastructure. Crescent Ridge had a walking path, a picnic bench zone, and a kayak launch. All of them sat partially, unknowingly, on land now considered public jurisdictional buffer zones, which meant permits, environmental reviews, and monthly maintenance costs, no longer managed by the HOA's landscaper. Now, it had to be done, through county-licensed vendors only, at county-approved rates. The board wasn't prepared. Mark tried to stay calm. Sarah asked good questions. Ellie kept smiling like she was trying not to panic, but Laura just kept flipping her clipboard. This section of grass, previously trimmed by your volunteer committee, now falls under the runoff barrier regulations. You'll need to install proper edging and silt controls. This dock extension? It's a violation of coastal setback since it was built without permit, by HOA labor. Must be removed or retrofitted under new specs. You can keep your summer picnic series, but only if you pay the recurring usage fee, which, by the way, escalates annually under Section 13B. By the end of her walk, she handed Mark a folder. On the front, reclassification report, Crescent, lake bordering parcels, estimated fees, $7,680 per quarter. That was triple their usual lake maintenance budget. Mark brought the numbers to the next meeting. He didn't sugarcoat it. We're paying the price for overreach, he said. That $85 fishing fine cost us nearly $30,000 per year in reclassification fees. Someone in the back laughed. Most expensive fish in HOA history. Another added, next time, just let the man fish. But the damage was done. The HOA had built its little empire on common area control. Now, the very borders they once patrolled were legally out of reach. And the worst part? The residents weren't mad. They were relieved. Tomas, the retired accountant, stood up. I'd rather pay county fees and trust the law than live under HOA dictatorship. At least the county doesn't fine me for wind chimes. Applause followed, but the HOA wasn't quite done bleeding. Laura returned the next month with a revised audit. Several other parcels along the lake, owned by older homes, had deeded micro-ownerships, like mine. Most residents didn't even know, but I had. Aaron and Joe from lots 19 and 21 each owned slivers. Rosa, a widow near the West End, had a 20-foot stretch she never used. I met with all three, sat in their kitchens, showed them the deed system, showed them the impact, then asked one question. Would you consider donating it? They didn't. Hesitate. Aaron smiled. They fined my dad once for putting up a flagpole. Let's call it even. Joe laughed. I've always hated those monthly dues anyway. Rosa? She just nodded. I'd like to leave something better than rules behind. And just like that, the county received 3 more donations, each one, expanding the public strip, each one shrinking the HOA's influence. Laura emailed me privately. You've unintentionally created a buffer zone wide enough to classify Crescent Lake as a mixed regulation site. The HOA will now need full event insurance, annual environmental certifications, and outside inspection before any community activity. She ended the message with, well played. The next HOA meeting opened with a single chart. It showed annual costs from 2020 to now. A red line in 2023 spiked like a heart attack. Sarah shook her head. We can't keep this up. We're going broke just managing our own mismanagement. That's when Ellie spoke. We could file for easement return. The room went quiet. What's that? Someone asked. It means we surrender the rest. Of the lake access. Let the county manage it entirely. We just let go. Mark turned to me. Carl? Thoughts? I stood up. Not angry, just honest. You fined me for fishing on land I owned. You turned neighbors into watchers. You let control blind you to community. And when I handed you back the truth, you fined me again. I paused. If you want peace, stop acting like you own what was never yours. Then I sat back down, and no one argued. They voted 2 weeks later. Easement rights, dissolved, lake access, officially county regulated, and with that, the HOA lost its final weapon. No more patrols, no more fine threats, no more fake power. But the story didn't end in bitterness, because once the lake belonged to the people again, something changed. Joe started a small kayak rental booth, county permitted, fully legal. Rosa opened a garden bench memorial near her donated shoreline, dedicated to her late husband. The HOA, stripped of its old tools, started building instead of punishing. Ellie organized a cleanup drive. Mark held open meetings under the old picnic tent, now relocated legally on a different parcel. And Sarah? She designed a small wooden arch at the path entrance. Burned into the beam were these words: "Welcome to Vickers Waters. Rest easy, cast freely." I didn't ask for any of it, but I was there the day they unveiled it. A group of kids raced past on bikes. Two old fishermen nodded at me from the dock, and someone handed me a lemonade and said, "This all started with you, huh?" I smiled. No. It started with a bad fine and a worse assumption. Because here's the thing, revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a ripple, a transfer form, a conversation across a kitchen table. Sometimes it's just a man in a chair, handing back the rights that no one respected, and letting the system do the rest. By the time spring rolled around, the lake had a new rhythm. No more laminated "no fishing" signs. No early morning clipboard patrols. No HOA-issued violation tickets stuck under kayak paddles. Instead, families picnicked under the oaks. Old veterans brought radios and thermoses. Kids raced the breeze in paddle boats, laughing too loudly, and no one cared. It felt like a place earned back. Mark still led the HOA, but now he spent more time helping than ruling. He started a Saturday fix-it club for minor home repairs. Sarah ran a community garden where fines used to be handed out for improper vegetable displays. And Ellie? She painted a mural across the side of the old HOA shed. It showed a man in a lawn chair, rod in hand, hat tilted low, with a sign behind. Hymn that read, "Let the lake be." Everyone knew who it was. They just smiled and nodded every time they passed. I never asked for legacy. But Crescent Ridge gave it to me anyway. The donated lakefront, now listed in the county guidebook as Vickers Waters Public Access, the path that cuts through the strip. Locals call it Redemption Walk. And when the reporter from Channel 9 came back for a follow-up, she said, "I've never seen an HOA flip its reputation this fast." I told her the secret. You don't fight the system, you refocus it. What no one saw coming was the ripple effect. Other neighborhoods heard about Crescent Ridge, about the fines, the donation, the audit, the quiet counterattack that left no damage, just reform. 2 counties over, a man emailed me. "My HOA charged me for shade from my own tree. I used your story as a case study. Guess what? They backed off." A woman sent a photo of a bench she placed near a local stream, saying, "No more permission slips, just peace." I printed every message and tucked them into a leather folder. Called it Lake Letters, because the point was never vengeance. It was proof that dignity doesn't need volume, just direction. Late one evening, I walked the trail alone. The sun was low, coloring the sky like old peach fabric. The breeze tugged at the cattails. That's when I saw it at the edge of the dock, a small wooden box, unmarked, no note. Inside, a gold-painted fishing lure, and a tiny plaque that read, "For the one who made it ours again." I didn't cry, but I sat on that dock for a long time. The HOA board eventually created a new rule, not a restriction, but a right. It was called the Community Balance Clause. It read, "No rule shall be enforced unless it protects safety, fairness, or shared well-being. All other matters default to individual freedom and courtesy." It passed unanimously, and just like that, Crescent Ridge stopped being a place of permission and became a place of participation. Mark hosted his last HOA meeting in June. He stood beside the garden arch, holding a glass of lemonade, and said, "It's strange how we used to use power to shut people down. Now we use it to lift them up, and we owe that pivot to one quiet fisherman who wouldn't pay $85 to be controlled." People clapped. Kids didn't understand, but the adults did. The swing under the old tree stayed polished. Residents. Repainted it every year. Nobody vandalized it. Nobody dared. It wasn't just a bench. It was a memory carved in oak. Some folks moved away. Some passed on. But every new resident received a copy of the story, titled simply, The Fine That Fixed Us. It came printed in the welcome packet, along with a laminated lake map, and a keychain with a little wooden bobber engraved, You're free to cast here. Years later, I sat on that same dock. Next to me, a girl no older than 10 dropped a line in. Did you really give this lake away? She asked. Part of it, I said. Why? My dad says it was a power move. I laughed. Your dad's not wrong. She leaned over. But I think it was just nice. I looked out at the water, calm, forgiving. Yeah, I think you're not wrong either. I don't know where Richard ended up. I heard he moved south, joined a new HOA. Rumor was he didn't run for office this time. Maybe he learned. Maybe not. But Crescent Ridge? We learned, and we didn't forget, because when you take something that was used to punish and turn it into a gift, that's not revenge, that's restoration, and no rule book can undo that. I still fish, same rod, same rhythm. Only now, I bring extras, because someone always stops to ask if they can try. And I always say yes. Not because I want them to catch anything, but because I want them to remember what it feels like to stand on land where no one's watching over their shoulder, where they're welcome by default, not exception.